The rain fell soft but persistent over Jackson Square, turning the cobblestones slick and dark. Eleanor Beaumont stood beneath the colonnade of the Cabildo, her silk parasol doing little to shield her from the damp wind that swept in from the Mississippi River. The air smelled of wet earth, sweat, and something far more sinister, the sharp metallic scent of fear. Before her, on a wooden platform slick with rain, stood a line of human beings. Men, women, some barely more than children, all shackled at the wrists and ankles. Their eyes were hollow, defeated. Eleanor had witnessed this spectacle before, too many times to count, but she had never grown numb to it. Each auction was a fresh wound on her conscience. "Next lot!" the auctioneer bellowed, his voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. He was a corpulent man with a red face and tobacco-stained teeth, his enthusiasm for his work revolting. "Fine specimen here, gentlemen. Strong back, good teeth, and get this, he can read." A ripple of laughter and nervous whispers moved through the assembled crowd of planters and merchants. Reading was dangerous. A literate slave was a threat to the entire system. Eleanor's breath caught as two overseers dragged a young black man onto the platform. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with skin the color of polished mahogany. But it was his face that arrested her. High cheekbones, a strong jaw set in defiance, and eyes that burned with a fierce, unbroken spirit despite the fresh wounds that marked his body. Blood seeped through the rough cotton of his shirt, where a whip had opened his flesh. "Samuel Carter, age 24, the auctioneer announced, yanking the man's shirt open to display the scars crisscrossing his back. Caught trying to tell the others he was born free in Virginia. Got himself some fancy ideas. Needs a firm hand to teach him his place." Samuel's eyes swept across the crowd with contempt. When his gaze passed over Eleanor, she felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition she couldn't name. "Bidding starts at $1,200, the auctioneer shouted. "Who wants this clever buck?" A man in a black coat near the front raised his hand. Eleanor knew him, Silas Whitmore, a plantation owner from upriver with a reputation for cruelty that made even other slaveholders whisper. It was said he worked his slaves to death within 5 years and simply bought more. The bidding climbed. 1,300. 1,400. Whitmore's face remained impassive, his hand rising steadily. Eleanor's heart hammered. If Whitmore bought Samuel, the young man would be destroyed, broken in body and spirit, if not killed outright. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years, who had once tried to help a runaway and had been beaten by Eleanor's father for her trouble. Eleanor had been 12, hidden behind a door, listening to her mother's cries. That night her mother had whispered to her, "Remember, Eleanor, we are all God's children, all of us." Her mother had died of fever 6 months later, but Eleanor had never forgotten those words. 1,500, Whitmore called. Eleanor's hand rose before she could stop herself. $2,000. Every head turned. Women did not typically bid at slave auctions, and certainly not respectable unmarried women like Eleanor Beaumont. The crowd parted slightly as Eleanor stepped forward, her chin high despite the trembling in her knees. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. "Miss Beaumont, are you certain?" "I'm quite certain. $2,000. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. 2,200. 3,000, Eleanor said firmly. A shocked silence fell over Jackson Square. $3,000 was an extraordinary sum, enough to buy 3 prime field hands. Whitmore's jaw tightened, but after a long moment, he stepped back with a curt nod. He would not engage in a public bidding war with Marcus Beaumont's daughter. "Sold!" the auctioneer cried, bringing his gavel down with a crack, "to Miss Eleanor Beaumont for $3,000. Eleanor's hands shook as she signed the bill of sale and watched the chains being transferred from the auction block attendants to her own hired man. Samuel stood motionless, his eyes fixed on her with an expression she couldn't read. Suspicion, perhaps, or bewilderment. As the crowd dispersed, she heard the whispers begin. They would reach her father's ears before she arrived home. The Beaumont estate sat 6 miles from the city, a grand columned house surrounded by fields of sugarcane that stretched toward the horizon. Eleanor rode in her carriage with Samuel chained in the wagon behind, driven by old Moses, one of her father's most trusted slaves. She had not spoken to her purchase. What could she say? She had saved him from Whitmore, yes, but she had still bought him. She owned him as surely as she owned her horse or her jewelry. The thought made her sick. When they arrived, her father was waiting on the veranda, his arms crossed over his chest. Marcus Beaumont was a tall man, broad in the shoulders, his hair silver, and his face weathered from years overseeing his holdings. His eyes, the same grey as Eleanor's, were cold as winter stones. "Eleanor, my study. Now." She dismounted and followed him inside, her heart sinking. The study smelled of cigars and old leather. Her father closed the door with deliberate care before turning to face her. "Have you lost your mind?" His voice was quiet, which was worse than shouting. $3,000 for a single field hand, and conducting yourself like a common trader in front of half the city. He would have died under Whitmore, Eleanor said, forcing her voice to remain steady. You know what that man does to his slaves. That is not our concern. You are an unmarried woman, Eleanor. Your behavior today will be the talk of every parlor in New Orleans. People will question your judgment, your morality, because I purchased a slave. Father, you own 47 human beings. How is my owning one any different? His hand struck her face before she saw it coming. The blow snapped her head to the side, and she tasted blood where her teeth cut her lip. You will not speak to me with such insolence, Marcus said, his voice like ice. I'm trying to protect you, girl. Do you understand nothing? There are rules in this world, order. You cannot simply indulge your sentimental whims without consequences. Eleanor straightened, meeting his gaze despite the burning in her cheek. May I go? He waved a dismissive hand. Put him to work in the fields, and you will stay away from him. Is that understood? Yes, father. But as Eleanor left the study, she had no intention of obeying. Samuel was given a space in the men's quarters, a long wooden building divided into small, airless rooms. He was fed, barely, and put to work cutting cane under the brutal Louisiana sun the very next morning. Eleanor watched from her bedroom window as the overseer, a vicious man named Garrett, cracked his whip over the workers' backs. Samuel moved stiffly, his wounds from the auction clearly causing him pain. Twice that first day, Garrett struck him for moving too slowly. That night, after the house had gone quiet and her father had retired to his chambers with his brandy, Eleanor slipped out through the kitchen. Lydia, an older house slave who had been her mother's confidant, met her there with a bundle of clean bandages and a jar of salve. You be careful, Miss Eleanor, Lydia whispered. Your daddy finds out. He'll sell that boy downriver so fast. I know. Thank you, Lydia. Eleanor crossed the yard to the men's quarters, her heart pounding. The door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, the air was stifling, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and sickness. She found Samuel in the last room, lying on a thin pallet, his back to the door. I brought medicine, she said softly. He turned, and in the dim light of her candle, his eyes blazed. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. You're hurt. I'm a slave. Your slave. What do you care if I'm hurt? Eleanor flinched. I care because you're a human being. He laughed bitterly. That's not what the law says. The law says I'm property. Your property. Worth $3,000, apparently. I bought you to save you from Whitmore. Did you? Samuel sat up slowly, wincing. Or did you buy me because it made you feel righteous? Because it eased your conscience to save one man while your family profits from the suffering of dozens more? The words struck like a physical blow. Eleanor set the bandages down on the rough floor. You're right, she whispered. You're absolutely right, but those wounds will fester if they're not cleaned. Please, let me help you." For a long moment, Samuel stared at her. Then, slowly, he turned his back to her, pulling off his torn shirt. Eleanor's hands trembled as she cleaned the lacerations. The whip had laid open his flesh in several places, and infection had already begun to set in. She worked in silence, applying the salve as gently as she could. Samuel never made a sound, though she knew it must have hurt terribly. "You were born free," she said quietly. The auctioneer mentioned Virginia. "Norfolk," Samuel said, his voice rough. "My father was a freedman, a carpenter. He taught me the trade, taught me to read, too, even though it was illegal. He said knowledge was the only thing they couldn't take from us." He paused. He was wrong. "What happened?" "I witnessed something I shouldn't have. A merchant, white man named 𝘾𝙝𝙖𝙞𝙣, killed his business partner in a dispute over money. I was working on a building nearby, saw the whole thing. 𝘾𝙝𝙖𝙞 couldn't risk me testifying, so he had me kidnapped. Sold to a trader who brought me south." Samuel's voice hardened. "Free one day, property the next. That's how justice works in your world." Eleanor finished wrapping the bandages. "I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't change anything." "No," she agreed softly. "It doesn't." But she came back the next night, and the night after that. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. The hostility in Samuel's eyes gradually gave way to something more complex. Curiosity, perhaps, or cautious respect. Eleanor brought him books smuggled from her father's library, and they talked in whispered conversations about everything and nothing. Samuel told her about his dreams of being a master carpenter, of building beautiful things with his hands. Eleanor confessed her own stifled ambitions, how she had wanted to teach, to travel, to be more than just an ornament in her father's house, waiting for an acceptable marriage proposal. "You could do those things," Samuel said one night. "You're free." "Am I?" Eleanor asked bitterly. "I'm a woman in a world run by men. I have no legal rights, no property of my own. If I marry, everything I have becomes my husband's. I'm a different kind of prisoner, Samuel." "Don't compare our situations," he said sharply. "You sleep in a soft bed. You eat full meals. No one whips you for looking them in the eye." "You're right, I'm sorry." She paused. "But doesn't that make it worse? That I have all these advantages and still feel trapped?" Samuel studied her for a long moment. "Maybe we're both prisoners. Just different kinds of cages." The intimacy of their conversations frightened Eleanor. She knew she was crossing dangerous lines, not just the social boundaries between white and black, free and enslaved, but something deeper. She found herself thinking about Samuel during the day, anticipating their nighttime meetings with a flutter in her chest that she hadn't felt since she was a girl. And Samuel, despite his initial resistance, found himself drawn to her in ways that terrified him. She was kind, yes, but also fierce and intelligent. She challenged his assumptions about white people, even as she acknowledged the fundamental injustice of the world they inhabited. More dangerous still, when she bent over his wounds, when their hands accidentally touched, he felt something electric pass between them. It was Lydia who warned her first. "Miss Eleanor, people are noticing," the older woman said one morning as she braided Eleanor's hair. "You spend too much time near the quarters. Your daddy's overseer has mentioned it to him." "Sir," Eleanor's stomach dropped. "What did my father say?" "Nothing yet, but he's watching. And that's Samuel. People see the way he looks at you when you pass. That boy's going to get himself killed if you're not careful." "I haven't done anything wrong," Eleanor protested. "Doesn't matter what you've done, child. Matters what it looks like." Lydia's hands stilled. "Your mama tried to help people too. You remember what happened to her?" Eleanor remembered. That afternoon, her father summoned her to the veranda where he sat with his afternoon whiskey. "Eleanor, sit." She obeyed, her hands folded in her lap. "There have been rumors," Marcus said slowly, "about your interest in that slave you purchased, the one who can read." His name is Samuel, Father. His eyes hardened. I don't care what his name is. You will stay away from the quarters. Effective immediately, he will sleep in the male work barn, not the house servants' area. You have no reason to go near him. But his wounds... Garrett will tend to any medical needs. This discussion is over. Eleanor's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she nodded. To argue would only make things worse. That night, she did not go to Samuel, or the night after. Samuel, lying in the hot, mosquito-infested work barn, wondered if she had finally come to her senses. It was better this way, he told himself. Safer. Whatever had been building between them was impossible, dangerous, doomed from the start. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. 3 weeks later, a man arrived at the Beaumont plantation, a well-dressed stranger from Virginia who asked to speak with Marcus in private. Eleanor, reading in the parlor, heard raised voices from the study. Curiosity overcoming propriety, she slipped closer to the door. "Cannot allow any loose ends," the stranger was saying. "Carver has powerful friends. If the Carter boy testifies, the entire enterprise collapses." "I understand," her father replied, "but the boy is my daughter's property. I can't simply—" "You can, and you will. Carver will pay handsomely for his silence. Permanent silence." Eleanor's blood ran cold. They were talking about Samuel, about killing him. "How much?" her father asked. "5,000. Twice what your daughter paid." There was a pause. Then, "Done. Take him tonight. Make it look like he ran away. My overseer will be cooperative." Eleanor fled back to her room, her mind racing. They were going to murder Samuel, and her father was complicit. The merchant Carver that Samuel had mentioned, the one who had killed his partner, was part of a larger criminal network, and her father was involved. She had to warn him, had to help him escape. But how? As dusk fell, Eleanor found Lydia in the kitchen house. "I need your help," she whispered urgently. "Samuel's life is in danger." Lydia's eyes widened as Eleanor explained what she had overheard. "Lord have mercy," the older woman breathed. "Miss Eleanor, if you help him run, they'll know it was you." "I don't care. Your daddy will disown you. Or worse." "I don't care," Eleanor repeated, her voice firm. "I won't let an innocent man die." Lydia studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your mama would be proud." She pressed a key into Eleanor's hand. "Back door of the work barn. There's a horse in the east stable. Old mare, but steady. Don't take the main road. Cut through the bayou toward the north. There's folks there who help." "Runners." Eleanor hugged her. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet, child. This is just the beginning of your troubles." Eleanor waited until after midnight when the house was silent. She packed a small bag, money, food, a knife, maps, and slipped out into the humid night. The work barn loomed ahead, dark and silent. She unlocked the door and found Samuel instantly alert, sitting up on his pallet. "Eleanor? What?" "They're going to kill you," she whispered urgently. "Tonight. A man from Virginia, the merchant you testified against. He's paying my father to silence you. We have to go, now." Samuel stared at her. "We? I'm coming with you." "Are you insane? You can't—" "I can and I will. Now get up. We don't have much time." They made it to the stable without incident. Eleanor saddled the mare quickly, her hands remembering the movements from childhood riding lessons. Samuel stood watch, his body tense. "Can you ride?" she whispered. "Well enough." "Then let's—" The gunshot cracked through the night, and Samuel jerked, stumbling. Eleanor screamed as blood bloomed on his shoulder. "Run!" Samuel gasped, pushing her toward the horse. But before she could mount, rough hands grabbed her from behind. Garrett, the overseer, twisted her arms behind her back as more men emerged from the shadows. Her father, the Virginia stranger, several armed overseers. "Foolish girl," Marcus Beaumont said, his voice cold. "Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this?" They dragged Samuel and Eleanor back to the main house. Samuel's shoulder wound bled freely, but no one moved to help him. Eleanor fought against Garrett's grip until her father backhanded her, splitting her lip. "Lock her in her room," Marcus ordered. "And you—" He turned to the stranger from Virginia. "Take the slave and finish this. I want him dead and buried before sunrise." "No," Eleanor screamed. "Father, please. He's innocent." "He's a witness to a murder that could expose a very profitable arrangement," Marcus said coldly. "And you, daughter, have betrayed your family for a slave. When this is over, we will discuss your future, which will likely involve an asylum." The stranger and two other men hauled Samuel toward the door. His eyes met Eleanor's across the room. And in that moment, everything she had been trying to deny crashed over her like a wave. She loved him. Against all reason, all logic, all the rules of the world they lived in, she loved him. "I'm pregnant," Eleanor said. The room went dead silent. Her father's face turned purple. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant," Eleanor repeated, her voice stronger now. "With his child. Kill him, and you'll have to explain to society how your unmarried daughter is carrying a slave's bastard. How do you think that will look for your business arrangements, father? Your reputation?" It was a lie, a desperate, dangerous lie. But it was the only weapon she had. Marcus Beaumont stared at his daughter as if seeing a stranger. "You disgusting whore," he whispered. "Perhaps," Eleanor said, meeting his gaze. "But I'm your disgusting whore, your daughter, your problem. Kill Samuel, and I will tell everyone, every newspaper, every church, every person who will listen, exactly what kind of man you are, what kind of enterprise you're protecting." The Virginia stranger stepped forward. "This is taking too long. Let me handle the girl too." He pulled a pistol from his coat. Everything happened at once. Samuel, despite his wounded shoulder, wrenched free from his captors and threw himself at the stranger. They went down in a tangle of limbs. The pistol discharged, the bullet lodging in the ceiling. Garrett released Eleanor to join the fight, and she ran. Not away, but toward Samuel, grabbing a heavy candlestick from a side table. She brought it down on Garrett's head with all her strength. The overseer crumpled. "Get out!" she screamed at Samuel. "Run!" But Samuel grabbed her hand instead. "Not without you." They fled through the French doors onto the veranda as more shots rang out behind them. The humid night swallowed them as they ran toward the tree line, Eleanor's skirts tangling around her legs, Samuel leaving a trail of blood in their wake. Behind them, they could hear her father shouting orders. "Find them! I want them both dead!" They plunged into the bayou, dark, treacherous water filled with snakes and alligators and worse things. Eleanor had hiked these swamps as a child, knew some of the paths, but in the darkness, everything looked different. Samuel stumbled, his face gray from blood loss. Eleanor caught him, her arms barely strong enough to support his weight. "Keep moving," she gasped. "There's a settlement, Lydia told me, north, where the river bends." Torches appeared behind them, shouts, dogs barking. They pushed deeper into the swamp, water rising to their waists, then their chests. Eleanor's beautiful dress was ruined, heavy with mud and water. Samuel's breathing grew labored. "Leave me," he said. "You can still go back. Tell them I forced you." "Shut up," Eleanor said fiercely. "I'm not leaving you." They stumbled onto a small island of solid ground, collapsing against the trunk of a massive cypress tree. Samuel's blood had soaked through his shirt completely. Eleanor tore strips from her petticoat, trying to bind the wound, but her hands were shaking too badly. "Eleanor," Samuel said softly. "Why did you do this?" "Because I love you," she whispered. "I love you, and I couldn't let them kill you." His hand found hers in the darkness. "I love you too. God help me, I do." She kissed him then, desperate and hungry and achingly sweet. His lips tasted of blood and swamp water, and freedom. The sound of approaching dogs grew louder. "We have to keep moving," Eleanor said, but when she tried to help Samuel stand, his legs wouldn't support him. He had lost too much blood. "Go," he said. "Eleanor, please, save yourself." "No." The torches were closer now. She could see them through the trees, hear the splash of boots in water. Eleanor made a decision. She kissed Samuel one more time, tasting salt, whether from the swamp or her tears. She couldn't tell. Then she stood and walked back toward the lights, placing herself between Samuel and the approaching men. Her father emerged from the darkness first, his face a mask of rage. Behind him were Garrett, blood streaming from his head wound, the Virginia stranger, and half a dozen armed men. "It's over, Eleanor," Marcus said. "Step aside." "No. I will not ask again." "Then don't ask," Eleanor said. Her voice didn't shake. "You want Samuel? You'll have to kill me first." For a long moment, father and daughter stared at each other across the dark water. Then the stranger raised his pistol and fired. The bullet hit Eleanor in the chest, the impact spinning her backward. She fell, the dark water rising to meet her. Samuel screamed the last thing she heard before the world went black. Eleanor woke to whiteness. White walls, white sheets, white light streaming through lace curtains. For a moment, she thought she had died. Then the pain in her chest reminded her she was alive. "Easy now," a woman's voice said. "Don't try to move." Eleanor turned her head, a Herculean effort, and saw an elderly black woman sitting beside her bed. "Where?" "Safe house," the woman said. 12 miles north of New Orleans. You've been unconscious for 4 days." "Samuel." Eleanor tried to sit up, but agony lanced through her torso. "He's alive, healing. The bullet went clean through you, missed everything vital by inches. You're a lucky woman." "My father. They think you're dead. Your friend Lydia spread the story that you drowned in the bayou trying to escape. There was a funeral and everything." The woman smiled grimly. "As far as New Orleans is concerned, Eleanor Beaumont died a tragic death." Tears slid down Eleanor's face. "Can I see him? Samuel?" "In a few days, when you're stronger. He's been beside himself with worry." It took 3 weeks before Eleanor could walk without assistance. 3 weeks of healing and hiding and coming to terms with what she had lost. Her name, her family, her entire life. But when Samuel finally came to her room, his own shoulder heavily bandaged but his eyes bright with relief, she knew she had gained something far more valuable. "You're alive," he breathed, taking her hand. "So are you." They stood there, holding each other, 2 people who had been property and prisoner and were now simply human. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked. "There's a ship leaving from Mobile in 2 weeks," Samuel said, "bound for Canada. We have enough money. Lydia sent what she could save from your mother's hidden jewelry. In Canada, we can be free, really free. Together. If you'll have me, knowing that you'll never be able to come back. That as far as the world knows, Eleanor Beaumont is dead." Eleanor thought of her life before, the grand house, the fine dresses, the suffocating expectations. Then she thought of Samuel's hands, Samuel's voice, Samuel's unwavering courage. "Eleanor Beaumont is dead," she agreed, "but I'm not. And wherever we go, whoever we become, we'll be free." 6 weeks later, in a small church in Toronto, a black man and a white woman were married under names not their own. The minister asked no questions. Neither did the neighbors who would later remember them as a quiet, hard-working couple who kept to themselves. Eleanor, now calling herself Sarah Carter, never saw New Orleans again. She never learned that her father's criminal network was eventually exposed by another witness, that Marcus Beaumont died in disgrace, his fortune seized by creditors. She never knew that Lydia was freed in the chaos that followed and lived to be 83. Telling anyone who would listen about the brave white woman who had loved enough to die. But Eleanor did learn other things. She learned that freedom was not the absence of struggle, but the right to choose your own battles. She learned that love was not always gentle or easy, but it was always worth the price. And 20 years later, when she held her granddaughter, a beautiful child with Samuel's eyes and her determination, she finally understood what her mother had meant all those years ago. We are all God's children, all of us. Some just had to fight harder to prove it.